Hey, hey, hey. Time for an out of this world story from rSpace. You meet someone who seems perfect, the kind of person you think you've hit the jackpot with, only to slowly realize that perfect was just a carefully curated illusion. They've been hiding exes, planning hookups behind your back, and somehow think the world, or even a pastor, exists to clean up their mess. Today on rSpace, when you learn that people who seem flawless on the outside can be absolute chaos once you start looking closer. Found out wife cheated on me when we were dating. She played the victim, so I ruined her reputation. I'm not sure why I'm posting this here. I'm a really private person normally. I don't have any social media apart from my Reddit, and I just use that to lurk. This is the throwaway account, though I shouldn't have to explain why. My wife Rachel and I, 27 female and 28 male, have been married for 2 years. We met through a mutual friend who introduced us. At the time, I'd been relying on dating apps, which turned out to be a big waste of my time. Most of the girls on those apps weren't looking to settle down, or they were just interested in having fun. It was a huge difference from what I was looking for. When my friend introduced me to Rachel, he told me that she'd been having the same problem. She'd mostly been running into guys who didn't have plans for the future. That felt like a good starting point for the two of us to get to know each other. We both wanted the same thing, which seemed to be getting harder and harder to find these days. We hit it off almost instantly and were dating within a week. We had a solid relationship with the whole time. We really got each other, and we were happy. I mean, really happy. I never had any idea that there could be anything wrong when we were dating. Since things were going so well, and we felt so compatible with each other, we decided not to waste any time and got married as soon as we could. Kids were in the plan from the beginning, but we only actually started trying about a year ago. It never worked out for some reason, which worried us a bit before. Now I feel like it's a blessing in disguise. My marriage is basically over right now, and having a kid in the mix would have just made everything more complicated. The problem began when I found out that Rachel has been talking to her ex. One day her friend Sarah came to visit and they started gossiping in the living room. I was inside doing some work on my computer. I wasn't really listening to anything they said. It was just girl talk, and I wasn't interested. But they were both talking pretty loud, and I couldn't help overhearing some parts of their conversation. Boring stuff, really, until Rachel's friend mentioned her ex, Steve. I hadn't heard the full statement, just something like, "What about Steve?" That made my ears perk up, but they both went completely silent right away. I could tell she'd said something she wasn't supposed to, and they were both listening for a reaction from me. I know it probably sounds like I was being paranoid or something. She hadn't mentioned her ex in years, and Steve is a pretty common name. But the way they'd both gone dead silent after convinced me that her friend had slipped up in mentioning the ex. Some background about her and Steve. They broke up about a year before we started dating. She said they'd had some differences that the two of them couldn't get over, though she never really went into detail about what those differences were. She never mentioned him much after that, and I got the impression that they had fallen out of touch completely. As soon as her friend left, Rachel popped in to check on me. I gave her my best poker face and tried to act like I hadn't heard anything out of the ordinary. The truth is, apart from the word Steve, I hadn't heard anything I could actually act on. If I tried to question her about it, she could simply tell me I'd misheard, and I'd leave myself looking like an idiot. We made some small talk for a bit, and I had the feeling that she was trying to probe how I felt to see if I was upset or something. She was staring at my face, trying to read my expression. I didn't let anything show. When she left, I was convinced that something was off. Had her friend randomly decided to bring up her ex after all these years? Or had the two of them started talking again? There was also the possibility that something else worse was going on. Whatever it was, I didn't like all the secrecy. Just from a little conversation, I knew that she was hiding something from me. I knew there was no way I'd get the truth out of her directly, so I'd have to uncover it myself. I decided that I needed to check out her phone. The fastest way to see if there was anything to be concerned about was to see what Rachel and her friend had been saying about him. That would be easier than looking for Steve, especially if she'd hidden his contact. I stayed up late that night and waited until she fell asleep. That wasn't hard, since she's always been an early sleeper. Once she was out for the night, I unplugged her phone from the charger and took it into the other room. Lucky for me, she's never cared much about using a PIN for her phone. I guess it's because she never had anything to hide for most of the time we'd been together. I went straight to her messages with Sarah. After she'd left, Sarah had sent a message asking if I hadn't heard them. Rachel said she'd spoken to me, and she was sure I hadn't heard anything. Sarah apologized for slipping up, and Rachel said it was fine. They didn't say anything else about the incident after that, so I went back further into their messages. I found what I was looking for about 2 weeks back into their messages. Rachel admitted that they'd been talking for a while. Her friend seemed appropriately shocked and said she didn't think it was a good idea. Rachel assured her that they were just talking and that nothing would happen. They mentioned him a few times after that, but it was mostly just Rachel sharing something he had said, and Sarah reminding Rachel that she didn't support it. None of that let me know exactly how far the two of them had gone, though. If Rachel had really started meeting him in person, it was unlikely she would tell Sarah, since she was pretty open about how much she was disapproved of it. So I went looking for her texts with Steve. That was a lot harder than finding her messages with Sarah. I couldn't find a Steve anywhere, so I started going through all of her messages with her contacts to see if any stood out as unusual. I eventually found him, saved under Ben Marketing. I knew about Ben from marketing. He was an older guy in his 50s, not the type of person I'd suspect under normal circumstances. The moment I realized she was talking to Steve instead of Ben, I knew it was over. It didn't matter whether they'd met up or done anything together. Talking to her ex and hiding his name in her phone was a red flag big enough to see from the moon. I had been worried about getting caught with her phone before, but now that I had some proof of what she'd been up to, I didn't care. I took my time going through the messages all the way from the beginning. Steve was the one who had initiated contact with her. He started off saying that he'd been thinking of her and just felt like talking. It was pretty obvious that it was just a line to get involved with her, and she bit. I felt frustrated as I kept reading the messages, watching her engage with this guy who was obviously just trying to get back in her pants again. I wondered whether she really thought he was just being friendly, or if she knew what he wanted all along and just liked the attention. I had a feeling that it was the second one, but it didn't really matter anyway after what came next. Steve started making his move. He started talking about old times and asked if she was as happy with me as she was when they were together. She insisted that she was. He said that he knew she was lying because of the thing they had when we just started dating. That practically knocked the wind out of me. I remember being hung up on those words for a while. They had a thing when we were dating. So she lied to me about moving on from him, and she cheated on me. That was a huge deal to me. It didn't matter whether it had happened years ago because now I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. But somehow, things still got worse. Eventually, he got her to cave, and she admitted that she'd started thinking about him sometimes. He grabbed his opportunity, and soon they were talking about meeting up again. It didn't look like they'd actually met up yet, but the intent was enough to set me off, especially when they started sending each other flirty messages, reminiscing about old sexual encounters. I'd already read enough to know that I was done, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to make sure I read through everything, and I did. I've learned from other people's stories on this sub, and I immediately made sure to send a copy of everything to my phone. I sent myself her conversations with Steve and Sarah. I skimmed through the rest of her messages, but she never mentioned her ex to anyone else. Once I had enough from her phone, I went back to the bedroom. A week later, and I still haven't said anything to her. I debated walking up to her to confront her that same night, but I decided not to act out of emotion. I want all of my next moves to be carried out logically. I've already started talking to divorce lawyers to get started on the paperwork. I don't care that she cheated before we got married. If she did it once, then she'll do it again. She already proved that when she started making plans to meet up with him again. Update 1. I've been sitting on this for a while. I wasn't planning to post anything else here, but there have been some developments, and there was a lot of interest in my original post. I followed through with the lawyer, and we're in the early stages of divorce now. When I confronted her, she didn't react how I expected her to. I sat her down and calmly explained everything. When I told her that I'd heard the conversations with Sarah, she stiffened like she knew what was coming. But when I explained that I'd been through her phone and seen her messages with Steve, she just sat there calmly. When I asked whether she'd slept with him when we were dating, she shrugged and admitted they'd hooked up a few times. She said it meant nothing and that she was just trying to get him out of her system at the time. I couldn't believe she was being so nonchalant about it. I asked her if she thought that made it okay, and she just said it didn't matter because it was a long time ago. She claimed the past was the past, and we wouldn't gain anything from dredging it up. I was almost speechless. I wondered if she actually believed what she was saying. I asked her if she would have the same opinion if I was the one who had cheated back when we were dating. She didn't even hesitate. She said she'd forgive me because it happened before we got married. That's when it clicked. Her whole defense was based on some imaginary rule she'd made up. She decided that cheating didn't count if it took place before marriage. Obviously, it was stupid, and I'm sure she knew it. It was just a dumb rationalization that she came up with to protect herself. I reminded her that it wasn't all in the past because the two of them had been planning to get back together. I even quoted some of their messages about how eager they were to get their hands on each other again. Just like before, she had an excuse ready. This time she said it was fine because they hadn't slept together and they didn't plan to. It was all just talk. I felt like tearing my hair out. It was frustrating watching her make excuse after excuse for what she'd done. I decided to stop arguing with her because it was going nowhere, so I told her that I was done with her. When I explained that I'd filed for divorce, she finally reacted. She didn't admit any fault at first, but she started begging me to reconsider. She said it was a small mistake that she'd made years ago, and we'd been happy together ever since. I told her I might have been happy, but I was living a lie, and now that I knew the truth, I couldn't go back. When she realized that being dismissive wasn't going to work, she started panicking. She said she realized that she'd screwed up, and it would never happen again. I reminded her that she'd literally planned to sleep with him. She started crying and insisted that she wasn't going to go through with it. I told her that I wanted her to leave the house, but she completely refused to acknowledge that. She just spent the rest of the night crying and pleading. Eventually, I had to lock myself in the bedroom just to get away from her. Things were weird at home after that. She tried to act like nothing happened at first. She even tried to kiss me the next morning. I stepped away from her like she was contagious. Once she realized that I wasn't about to sweep everything under the rug, she started following me everywhere, trying to get me to forgive her. I spent a lot of time out of the house just to get away from her, and only came home to sleep. She finally realized that it was for real when she got the divorce papers. She moved out the very next day, but she made sure to tell me that she wasn't giving up on us yet. When I told her that I was done with her for good, she just said that I should give it a few days and keep an open mind. A few months passed, and my mind hasn't changed a bit. I still feel like I'm making the right decision, and I don't miss her. Yeah, there's been some loneliness and sadness, but that's more from losing a marriage and feeling lied to. I don't actually want her back in my life. Update 2. Well, things got really out of hand after my last post. I'm finally a free man, but a lot has happened on the way there. But overall, I'm pretty lucky with how the divorce turned out. We'd been pulling up some cash for a down payment on a house, and we split that evenly. That didn't feel very fair to me because I'd contributed quite a bit more than half, but I knew that was the best I'd get. I was just happy that I kept my car and I didn't have to pay alimony because we hadn't been married long enough. But before the divorce was finalized, I got a call I wasn't expecting. I'd been ignoring Rachel's calls for months by that point. I wanted to move past her, and I knew the best way to do that was to cut contact with her, unless it was absolutely necessary. I'd also informed her parents about what led to our divorce, and made them understand that I didn't want to stay in contact. They weren't happy about that, but they respected my decision. So I was shocked when I answered a call from a man who introduced himself as your wife's pastor. A little background on this, because I didn't think it would be relevant in my earlier posts. Rachel comes from a religious family, though she isn't particularly religious herself. We never went to church, and I'd confidently peg her as non-practicing. Her parents were a different story, though. Despite that, they weren't the ones who got their pastor to talk to me. He told me Rachel was the one who had asked him to speak to me. I was already annoyed that she thought it was a good idea to involve a stranger in our affairs. That turned to anger as he kept explaining. He started preaching at me, which I couldn't stand. I won't bore you with all the details, but he basically said it was morally wrong to get divorced over something she'd done in the past. I was furious. I hated the condescension of it all. I wasn't about to have someone lecture me on how to live my life, especially on behalf of my cheating wife. So I told him the whole truth, that she hadn't just cheated on me when we were dating, she'd been planning to sleep around. I even told him that I had proof, and I'd send it to him. There was a shock and disgust in his voice while he struggled to find the right thing to say. That gave me a deep sense of satisfaction. I'd exposed Rachel for what she truly was. But I wasn't done. I tried to handle things maturely, but she'd gone and dragged someone else to try and browbeat me into taking her back. It didn't take me long to figure out how I wanted to deal with this. Since she'd brought her church into it, I thought it was only fair for me to do the same thing. So I joined her church Facebook group and made a post. She wasn't an active member of her church, but she did post on their Facebook page once in a while. She'd grown up in that church, and most of the older members were good friends with her parents and had known her since she was a kid. I was going to hit her where it hurt. I wrote a short caption introducing myself as the ex-husband of one of their members, and I explained that I was defending myself against slander that she'd been spreading about me. Then I gave a detailed summary of what she'd done and the events leading to our divorce. Coupled with the screenshots where she admitted to her affair and planned a new one, it sparked outrage immediately. The post was taken down by the admins within an hour, but it had done its damage by then. The comments were full of people expressing shock and disappointment in Rachel. A few even tagged her and her parents to ask if it was true. Rachel called me again, and this time I answered. She was so angry that she was crying. All she could do was curse me out and ask why I'd done that. I told her that she didn't have the right to try and get people to change my mind like she was the victim. I would have been happy to let things stay the way they were if not for the stunt she'd pulled. She said I'd completely ruined her reputation with her church members. She was getting texts and calls that she was afraid to answer, and her parents couldn't show their faces at church anymore. That was difficult for her because she was living with them throughout the divorce. Going no contact with her was easy after that. She stopped trying to reach out to me. Maybe she was just that mad because of what I'd done, or she'd finally realize that there was no chance of us getting back together. Either way, I was happy with the outcome. I felt like I'd gotten back at her and I could finally move on with my life. Speaking of moving on, it hasn't been easy. It's a whole process, but I'm taking it day at a time. I've found out that not having to deal with her anymore helps, and I've been making great progress ever since the divorce was finalized. Honestly, I hardly ever think about my marriage anymore. I was lucky to find out early and get out on time. If you ever find out about infidelity in your partner's past, I recommend doing what I did and cutting things off immediately. Don't give them a chance to cheat on you again. They'll always promise things will change, but they're still the same person. Man, the part that blows my mind is that she actually thought bringing a pastor into this would somehow make you the bad guy. Like, she's the one who lied, hid messages, and was planning to cheat again. But somehow that counts as a moral issue on your end? That's insane. But I guess people are always willing to point the finger at others than themselves, right? Not only that, but it's peak entitlement. Trying to weaponize religion to excuse your own behavior? You absolutely did the right thing walking away. She showed you who she really is, and good on you for not letting her flip the script and make you the bad guy. She tried, I'll give her that. Cheaters will try anything to look innocent. Have you ever caught someone you trusted lying or hiding something? What was it? Share it with us below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.